Hi, welcome back to the channel. As you may be aware, the ongoing impact of the war in Iran is that oil prices have spiked to levels that we haven't seen since the start of the war in Ukraine. And you may be thinking that this is hugely beneficial to Russia because Russia is one of the biggest exporters of oil in the world. And on top of that, Donald Trump has lifted sanctions on a lot of Russian oil that was already out on the sea, hundreds of millions of barrels. So when you put all of that together, you might expect that Russia is currently making a huge amount of profit from this situation. However, in today's video, I want to talk to you about a really interesting development because Russia has now announced that it's banning the export of gasoline products. So in today's video, we're going to talk about what's happening in Russia, why they're now banning gasoline on top of the existing restrictions that are already in place for diesel products, and how it's likely to impact on the Russian economy. But before we get into the details on all of that, could I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscribe button? It really does help me with the algorithm and also puts a smile on my face. So let's get into it. Now, as I mentioned at the start of today's video, oil prices have been very strong over the past month or so. We've seen prices rising above $100 per barrel. At one point, they touched $120. And that should be really positive for all oil exporters, including Russia, because when prices are high, you would normally expect a major producer to maximize output, maximize exports, and generate as much revenue and profit as possible. But that's not happening in Russia. Instead, Russia is now stepping in and saying that it's going to ban gasoline exports. And when a country like Russia starts restricting exports of refined products, that is a big signal that something isn't right, because that's what the Russian economy does. It exports oil and gas. You don't take those sort of decisions lightly unless you have a really serious problem. Now, the official explanation is that this is about stabilizing domestic fuel markets, making sure that there's enough supply within Russia, keeping prices under control and avoiding shortages. But when you look at what's been happening over the past few months, it becomes clear that there are some deeper issues here. The biggest factor is the ongoing drone campaign by Ukraine, which has been targeting Russian energy infrastructure. We've seen repeated attacks on refineries, storage facilities, and key export terminals. Some of Russia's largest refineries have been hit, and in some cases, they've had to shut down completely for prolonged periods of time. In other cases, they've reduced output because parts of the plants have been damaged. And that's really important because refining is where Russia makes its money. Selling crude oil is one thing, but when you process that crude into gasoline, diesel, and other refined products like jet fuel, then that's where you get the highest margins because you can sell those products at an elevated price. So if your refining capacity is being disrupted, that has a direct impact on your revenues. And then on top of that, you've got issues with logistics and exports. Some of the key ports and export routes have also been affected, which means that even if you can produce the fuel, you might not be able to ship it efficiently. And what that creates is a bottleneck. So instead of exporting that fuel and earning the revenue, it starts building up inside your system. At the same time, domestic demand doesn't go away. People still need fuel for transport, farming, and industry. So the government is now stepping in and effectively saying, we're going to prioritize Russian domestic supplies over exports. And that's why we've seen this gasoline ban being announced. Now, this all links back to what's already been happening with diesel. Russia's already had restrictions in place on diesel and other fuel exports for certain parts of the market. And this has now been extended out for many months. So what we're seeing is a tightening of those controls. And when you see both gasoline and diesel being restricted in different ways, that tells you that the system in Russia is under severe pressure. This isn't a one-off decision. This is part of a broader trend. Now, the timing of this is really significant because this is happening at a time when oil prices are high. In fact, some of the highest levels we have ever seen. And that means that Russia is missing out on what should be a major opportunity for the economy. Normally, in a strong price environment, you would want to sell as much as physically possible. You maximize your volumes and maximize your margins. But Russia is unable to do that right now. Instead, it's being forced to hold back its exports. And that means less revenue coming into the country. And there's another important point here as well, because refined products like gasoline and diesel generate higher margins than crude oil. So if you're not exporting those products, or you're forced to keep them in the domestic market, you're effectively earning less money per barrel. You're selling the cheaper products rather than the more expensive ones. So this is a double whammy from Russia's point of view: lower volumes going out and lower margins on what you are actually selling. And that feeds directly into the economy. Lower revenues for energy companies, lower tax receipts for the government, less foreign currency coming into Russia, and then you've got the knock-on effects. Russia has a large refining sector with major facilities spread across the country. These sites support jobs, local businesses and regional economies. If those refineries are not running at full capacity, whether it's because of damage or because of logistical constraints, that has a direct impact on employment, on wages and on spending. So there's a wider economic effect here. And then there's the domestic situation, because the reason you impose an export ban is because you're worried about supplies at home. So this tells you that fuel availability in Russia right now is tight, and that can create problems for businesses, for agriculture, for transport and the wider economy. So this just isn't about exports, it's also about internal pressure. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, what really shows is that the pressure on Russia's energy system is building. The drone attacks are not stopping Russia from producing oil altogether, but they are disrupting the system. They're hitting refineries, they're hitting infrastructure, they're creating inefficiencies, and they're forcing Russia into defensive decisions like this export ban. And that's why this matters, because instead of Russia fully benefiting from high oil prices at the moment, it's actually dealing with disruptions, restrictions, and missed opportunities. So this should have been a period where Russia was maximizing its revenues and its profits. But instead, it's a period where it's trying to manage problems. And that's why this is seriously bad news for the Russian economy. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments on this and related stories. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking, because it's always very easy just to look at a headline and think, oh, that's the story. But you always need to think about what the knock-on implications of all of these stories are. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. So scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below. It's a bit of fun. It's another way of funding the channel. So hopefully you can get involved in that. I've got some good deals on the go at the moment. Thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me in other ways. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a Patreon or a member, thank you so much for that support. It really does help to keep me motivated and making more videos. And here's something to put a smile on your face.
Those aren't even good jumps, really.